Welcome to the Deepak Saini Show.
He said he gon' huff and puff and blow my mind up. You meet the island girl, she might dirty wine up.
Welcome to the Deepak Saini Show. I'd like to thank J23 for the intro music. You can find a link to her music in the show description. My guest today is Ken Wentworth, aka Mr. Biz. Ken is a strategic business partner who helps business owners run their companies more profitably and more efficiently while achieving success beyond their wildest dreams. After ascending to the top 3% at a Fortune 15 company and breaking 6 world records, he now uses his experience and expertise to help others develop their skills to become the best version of themselves. I love that. I'm all about being the best version of yourself. He's the author of 3 best-selling books. He's an award-winning host of the Mr. Biz radio show, which ranks in the top 2% globally and has been featured over 400 times on TV. Ken, welcome to the Deepak Saini Show.
I'm happy to be here.
Man, I aspire to be you, top 2% on your radio show. That's awesome. Ken, I like to always start off with, most people, when they're a little kid and think, I want to be this when I grow up, I want to be this when I grow up, it like never turns out the way they expect it, unless, maybe like, I want to be a fireman and they actually become a fireman or whatever. So I'd love to go as far back as you want. How did you, get started? What was your first jobs and what led you to kind of where you're at today?
Well, when I was a little kid, I wanted to be a mechanic, an auto mechanic. Clearly that didn't work out. Well, I shouldn't say it didn't work out. I just didn't go down that path. And then, I grew up in a small town that was a blue-collar town, steel mill town, and the path for especially males, where you graduate high school, you go work in the mill for whatever 30 years, you retire with a decent pension, and you go. My dad worked there, my grandfather, my uncles, and that was always the path that I had envisioned myself taking until I did very well academically. I was very fortunate, and I think when I was an 8th grade or so, my dad snuck me into the mill because I told my dad I wanted to work in the mill. My dad was like, "No, you don't want to do that." No, I want to be like you, Dad. He snuck me into the mill, and I'm sure he took me to the most unsavory parts, right, to show me the crappiest, areas. And he literally walked me around, and he was like, "You see that? You want to do that?" And it was whatever, an 8th grade kid, I don't know, 12, 13 years old. I'm like, "Oh, it looks kind of cool, very physical, demanding job." He said, "Yeah, it is cool when you're in your 20s. And then kind of when you're in your 30s, and then when you're in your 40s, it starts to catch up with you, and your back's sore all the time, and you have physical problems, et cetera, et cetera." He said, "You want to work with your brain, not your back, if you can." And so that was kind of a turning point for me. And then I did very well academically, and then said, "Geez, no one in my family had ever gone to college before." So it was a completely foreign concept, and I did really well on a standardized test that I took, I think my freshman year or something like that of high school, maybe sophomore year, and scored very, very high nationally. And I started to get all these letters and stuff from colleges. And I'm like, man, I probably want to go the college route. And, again, no one in my family had ever done it before. So, we started to get these things. And even back then, it's a million years ago, as you could tell on my gray hair, but my dad was seeing how expensive college was. Because again, he had no concept because no one in our family had ever done it. And he said, look, he had a conversation with me late one evening. My dad was a night owl. And so it was during the summer and I was off school. And he said, "I really want you to be able to go to college, but I just don't see a way we're going to be able to afford this." Because he had no idea about student loans or, grants or scholarships or anything like that. And I just remember telling him, like, "I'll figure it out. I don't know how, but I'll figure it out." And thankfully I did. And it made a lot more sense to me as I got older. Because again, at the time I had really no concept of money either. And when I filled out my financial aid forms for my freshman year of college, I filled them out. But again, my parents had no idea, like, what the heck is this, right? And I remember very distinctly our household income, again, this was a long time ago, and but it was $26,000 for a family of 4.
Right.
In the college I went to, I ended up going to a private school, and now it's way more expensive, but back then it was, I think it was around $13,000 a year for room and board and tuition. And so then it started to make sense to me. Like, my dad's gross income was $26,000. My college is going to cost half of his gross income. I see why he was like, I just don't see how this is even possible, right? But anyway, yeah, so kind of went that route, ended up going to college, fortunately, and got an undergrad in accounting. Got some really good advice. So for those out there that might be listening or watching, and I got an internship, and that's one of the reasons I went to school that I did. And Worked for a guy that I really respected a lot, and he had multiple degrees and super intelligent guy. And I was talking to him one day and getting some career advice from him. Originally, my undergrad major was business administration because I knew I wanted to do something in business, but I wasn't sure exactly what. So I thought business administration is perfect, right? I'm going to learn a little bit about everything. He said, that's a terrible idea, and here's why. When you graduate, you're going to know a little bit about marketing, but not enough to work in marketing. You're going to know a little bit about accounting, but not enough to work in accounting. A little bit about finance, et cetera, et cetera. He said, if you want to do something in business and you know that, get a degree in accounting. Accounting will apply to everything. It's the grassroots of everything business. If you get that, you'll understand, it's much more granular. You'll understand the bigger picture much more easily. Thank goodness he gave me that advice. Otherwise, I don't know what I would have done with a business administration degree. I probably would have had to go back to school to get another degree or something like that. So I got an undergrad in accounting, worked in accounting for a couple of.
Can I just stop you there? And we'll continue on, please. I don't want to get this too far off. So number one, I don't know if you know about me, but that's what I did. I went to I just want to do business something. So I went in, and then luckily the school I went to is your first the first 2 years in the business school are still kind of general enough where you have to take a couple of everything, and then you have to specialize. And I did specialize in accounting as well, and did corporate accounting for 20 years. So I don't know if you knew that about me. Obviously, I don't do that anymore. But the question that I have, and I think all the audience has, is how did you pay for college? Before we go on too far, how did you actually pay for it?
I got a fair amount of academic scholarships and then student loans. So yeah, I remember it's the same thing as, again, I'm a numbers nerd, so I remember numbers. I can't remember people's names to save my life, but I can remember phone numbers from when I was 10 years old, right? And a lot of people are like, you remember phone numbers? You don't need to do that anymore. But back then you did. For my freshman year, we had to put down a $300 deposit for tuition and room and board, and we got a credit back because of everything we had. So I remember that. So I graduated with not actually, relatively speaking, not much in student loans because, again, I was fortunate enough to get grants and scholarships and things like that. But yeah, so that's how I did it. And again, that was all going back in the story. That was all sort of, I didn't know any of that stuff either. I'm thinking the same thing, well, it's, $14,000. That's what we have to come up with. And flash forward now, Deepak, it's my oldest has graduated from Ohio State University. My youngest is going into her senior year at University of Kentucky. So we've gone down the college path several times in the family now, in the affordability of it. And it's just gotten crazy, especially over the last 15, 20 years.
Yeah,
or so. But
I hear you. So sorry, I interrupted you. So he gave you that advice. You went into accounting.
Yeah, so I got out of school, worked in accounting for much different than you, it sounds like, Deepak. So I worked in accounting for 2 years, and I was like, this is way too much in the weeds for me. I'm much more of a big picture thinker kind of person. But that accounting base, I'm so thankful that I got that accounting base because what he told me was exactly correct. So I moved into finance, and being able to understand the debits and credits, and working with people that were peers of mine in the finance world, and drawing T accounts on whiteboards to explain, different things to them. And they were just they took 2 accounting classes for their finance degree. They're like, I don't know much about this. So it helped me tremendously. And then, I ended up working at JP Morgan for 20 plus years. Let's just call it that, Deepak. Again, gray hair, you can, we don't have to go into specifics, but, and I did a bunch of different things there. I mean, it was great working there. I got to do so much under one umbrella. I had a bunch of CFO roles for different parts of the business, different aspects of the business. Was the head of planning and analysis, corporate planning and analysis for a while. Ran some operations groups. I worked as an investment analyst for a while earlier in my career. Just did a whole bunch of different things, which now led me to be able to do what I do now since I left the corporate world, and be a fractional CFO, business strategist, things like that, and working with businesses to help them, optimize their business and things like that. With all that experience that I was able to get, I would have never been able to do what I do now. I wouldn't have the experience, I wouldn't have the knowledge. And then it goes all the way back. If I'd have stayed with a business administration degree, there's no way I would have ended up where I'm at now. Or it would have been delayed because, again, maybe I'd go back to school. I'd realize and say, oh crap, I got to go back and take another 8 accounting classes to get an accounting degree and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I'm very thankful for the accounting background and knowing that grassroots of it. But it was just too much in the weeds for me.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. Funny aside, when I was like my last semester, I was like, I don't know if I like accounting anymore. Like I'm not even done school yet. I don't know if I want to do this, but I'm so close. I'm like, I just want to get out of here, right? Basically, I'm just
Right.
going to finish off and whatever, and the rest is kind of history. You use the term fractional CFO, and I know what that means, but can you maybe answer that for the audience? And then maybe at the same time, like, what's, how important it is to have, a financial guru, if you will, or someone who really knows the numbers in your business, regardless of where you're at the scale of your business.
Yeah, so it's funny you'd ask that because again, I spent my entire career in the corporate world. So when I went to leave the corporate world, I'd always wanted to do my own thing, but I didn't know in what form or fashion. So when I resigned from JP Morgan, I got a mentor, sat down with him, and we went through this exercise, and he said, "Well, you need to be a CFO for 6 or 8 businesses." And I'm like, "How the heck do you do that?" My experience in the corporate world was being CFO of a business was 60 to 80 hours a week. Like, how the heck am I going to clone myself? How am I going to do this for
Right,
multiple
right,
businesses? And then he explained to me, no, you do it on a part-time or a fractional basis. He said, think about a business that's a small or medium-sized business that, maybe they're really good at making the widgets they make or the service they provide, but they're not as good on the financial side of things and the importance of that. But they're not big enough. They don't need a full-time CFO, but they really could use someone with that expertise on a part-time or fractional basis. And it made a lot of sense to me. Again, it was completely foreign concept to me because I've been in the corporate world in my entire career. And so, I said, okay, that sounds great. I got my first client, and it sounds so corny, Deepak, but I was maybe 2 weeks in, and it was a client that was local to me. I was driving home after being on site all day, and it was like the cheesy moment you see in a movie, like the clouds part and the sun's out, and you see the birds flying, and and I was like, man, it was like almost a mini epiphany of this is what I'm supposed to be doing right now. Like, I absolutely love what I do. My corporate career was amazing, fantastic. I have nothing bad to say. I didn't leave because I hated it. I know a lot of people do that. It wasn't that at all. I just always wanted to do something different. And I'd reached a level at JP Morgan, and I was in the process of being promoted from the top 3% to the top 1%. And I knew that was going to mean I was going to need to relocate to either New York City or London in the short term. And I had young kids, and I was like, we didn't really want to do that. And so I'm like, this is the time. I need to, take the entrepreneur leap and do it and figure it out. But I absolutely love what I do. And so I'm very blessed to have landed on my feet the way I have with all this. And, it's just, I love, I can't imagine going back and working for one company. I've had a couple clients, one in particular that I worked with as a fractional CFO, and they were getting to the point where that we could see they were going to need a full-time person. And I said, okay, let's start with the transition. I'll write up a job description. I'll help you with interviews. I'll help you choose someone. I'll help transition. I'll stay on board and help transition them into the role. And she said, well, why don't you just do it? We'll just hire you. And so we were back and forth. I said, I love working with you, but I love working with multiple clients. I like working in multiple industries, the different challenges and all that kind of thing. I don't want to just go to one place and do one thing anymore. I've tasted the sweet nectar of entrepreneurship, And she said, well, give me a number. And I think I can't remember. I think I told her like $2 million. And she said, for like how long of a contract? I said, for per year. And she said, we can't afford that. I said, exactly. So the conversation's over. Let's move forward with getting you a
right,
full-time
yeah.
CFO. But yeah, so that's what a fractional CFO is. Think about it as having someone who's a CFO for your business on a part-time basis that has 20 plus years of experience, has been there, done that, and has led multiple companies from a financial perspective, and can come into your business on a part-time basis and end up paying them probably what you would pay a full-time person who's much more junior, doesn't have the same experience, can't add the same value and things like that. And so that's, I guess, kind of how to think about it as far as what a fractional CFO is. And the importance of it, it's critically important. I mean, especially as your business continues to scale, in my opinion, it's really important when you're first starting out to set the foundation, the financial foundation. So as you're growing, you're not exacerbating little problems that you didn't,
Yeah.
have the solid foundation
I,
for.
I see that all the time with some of my own clients as well, where and again, that's not my role from the, I'm not I'm not working with them in a financial capacity, even though I have that experience. That's not what I
Yeah.
do now. But you're starting to see things like, look, if you're bad with cash flow now, you're going to be bad, double your revenue, like you're going to be just as bad with cash flow, right?
Yeah,
And
well,
that
yeah,
goes to people's personal lives too. I'll just say for the matter. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, and the real simple way to illustrate that is, if you're bad at cash flow and it's a 10% problem, let's call it, and you've got 100,000 in revenue, that's a $10,000 problem. When you go to a million, that's a $100,000 problem. You go to 10 million, it's $1 million problem, right? So it just continues to grow. And by the way, it probably it grows, accentuates as it gets bigger. So it probably goes from 10% as you grow to 12 or 15, and then 15
Yeah,
to 17,
exactly.
on up. So critically important to get that. And that's, the clients and folks I've worked with, that's what it is. They're really, really good at being a plumber or being an electrician or running a manufacturing company, but they just don't have the financial side of things and think about things in that way as much as they should. And so, critically important because, without cash on the business, right? And, if you're growing and not growing profitably, if you're growing just for the sake of growth and people, concentrate so much on the top line on their revenue number, if you're growing and your revenue is growing, but it's not at a profitable rate, you're going to go under, right? And so you end up with this, I call it the silent business code, this situation where your top line is growing, right? Revenue, sales are going, you're increasing 50% year over year, boom, boom, boom. But your net income is going down each year. And you're like, this is completely counterintuitive.
Sorry, Ken,
Sales
what'd you call that? Did
continue,
you say that was the silent which?
silent business killer.
Oh, the silent business killer. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so and the way I define that is it's a product or service or maybe multiple that you have that unknowingly you have priced that's either break even or is likely losing you money. And I call it the silent business killer because of course no one would knowingly do that. Hey, let me price this product at 10% under my cost. Like no one would do that on purpose. But Deepak, there's so many businesses. I mean, almost every business that I've ever worked with has at least one product or service that's like that, and not purposely done. Like some businesses, like an e-commerce business or commerce business, where maybe you have a loss leader, right, that brings people in the door,
Yeah,
and then
you're
they
trying to
buy other
upsell
stuff,
them to
right?
something else. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
not knowingly doing it in that manner. It's just that it's not priced appropriately, and so. And by the way, if it is priced under your cost, it's probably under market to your competitors, which probably means you're going to sell the crap out of whatever that is. And so you're going to, again, your sales are going to go up. You're going to sell a lot of
You're
these things
multiplying the
because you're,
problem. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. You're just exacerbating, you're multiplying the problem. And again, sales going up, net income going down. And you're like, what the heck is this? This doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Can I work with a lot of entrepreneurs? And everyone's always, and I know it's a bravado thing or whatever, but they're always like, oh, I make this or I'm this, whatever. And they're always talking top line. I'm like, who
Yep.
cares? We all have different cost structures. We all live in different parts of the world and cost of living stuff. Like, what's your net? Like, that's what and again, maybe it's from my accounting background. Like, what's the net? That's what I care about. I don't care what your top line is. What's your bottom line, right?
And it's funny you say that, Deepak, because a lot of times when I, talk to a prospective client, again, they're telling me their top line, and then they might tell me their gross margin. And a lot of people don't even know the difference between gross and net margins, things like that. I know obviously you would, someone with an accounting background, but I'm the same way. I'm like, gross margin can be manipulated. Maybe not in a nefarious way, but gross margin, you could like, oh, I'm going to take some stuff out of my cost of goods sold that really should be there. I'm going to put it down in the admin expenses. And so my gross margin is 65%, but your net margin is 5%. And I tell people this, and I catch a lot of heat for this, but I say, if you have a business and it is not in the food services industry and your net margin is less than 10%, you have a hobby, not a business. And a lot of people take that and they're like, well, how dare you? Like, that's a bunch of crap, but really it's so true. I mean, food services, the margins are so thin.
Yeah, yeah.
It's difficult to get to double digits in that particular industry. But anything outside of that, if you're less than double digits, you are working way too hard unnecessarily.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. I want to ask you this question. You have your three pillars of financial success. What are those three pillars?
Yeah, so the first one is cash flow, right? So these are the three things that I work with. Every single client I take on, we start with these three things. Some of them are really good at one or two of them and need help in the third. Some of them are okay, so it just depends. And then once we get these three things established, as I was talking about before, like a foundation, then we move on to other things. But so cash flow, there's almost always ways we can improve the cash flow. Even if your cash flow is in pretty good shape, there's probably ways we can improve it. critically important again. I say this in every my show, my closing is cash flow is king, right? You have to cash or you don't have a business. And the second one is the B word, Deepak. Not the B word that most people are thinking, but it's budget. Okay. If I'm talking to a prospective client and they balk at having a budget, I'm like, I'm not your guy. You have to have a budget. Mrs. Biz doesn't like that B word either. Like she doesn't like the word budget either. But it's so critically important because it's like anything else. You know, people talk about KPIs and you hear all these key, you know, these catchphrases, and budget is the ultimate KPI, right? You're measuring how you're doing on what your plans were for the year. So you can make those changes month to month. You see like, oh my gosh, sales are down and they're down in this particular area. Why are we lacking in sales? You can push your efforts towards that to really rectify things quickly, as opposed to, you know, you get to August and you're like, man, I don't know if we can hit our annual sales goal. Well, crap. Now you only have a few months left to do it. Like, rather than finding out in February, March, and April and making adjustments along the way, budget critically important. So that's the second one. And the third one is what I call margin management pricing. Is again, avoiding the silent business code, making sure you don't have products or services that are priced at break even. And not even just there, but making sure that the appropriate levels for your particular industry. You know, if you're in an industry that should have 30% margins, you should be able to do things at a 30% margin. If not, then maybe you shouldn't be providing that service. Maybe you should not be providing. Maybe you can't just do it in a cost-effective way enough to be competitive in the market. You know, real quick example, I had a client years ago, I've been working with for years. When I first started working with them, at the time they were doing about $1 million a year in revenue. And they had this job. It was like a $220,000 job. Huge, right? 22% of their annual revenue in one job. Like, he's just like salivating, like, I got to get this job. And they did this before I started working with them. So they take on this job, he prices it out, takes the job, does it. I come on board as they've already, you know, contracted for the job. So to get to the end of the year, and I'm trying to figure things out. I'm like, what the heck? I go back and look at that job. That job cost them $260,000 to do. So an example of what we've been talking about, you grew your revenue, your top line, by $220,000 on $1 million base company, like, huge, but you lost $40,000. Your net income went down by doing that job. Yeah. So critically important to make sure. And so now it's funny. So I created a pricing model for that particular client, and fast forward 6 months, he gets another bid from the same company, big company. And he says, yeah, this pricing model is saying that the job I should price it $180,000. I mean, what do you think? I said, sounds like 180,000. He's like, well, if I bid that, I'll never get the job. I said, if they won't pay 180,000, we don't want the job, because it'll be unprofitable, right? We want to make sure we'll make it. And we ended up losing. So funny end of that story, we ended up losing that. He bids 180. Someone else undercuts us, right? They get the job. 2 months later, that company comes to us and said, that company that beat you out on the bidding, they abandoned the job because they got into it and figured out, holy crap, we're going to lose our shirts on this job because they bid it so low. So they paid a $20,000 exit fee just to get out of the job. So then they came to my client and said, we need you to pick it up. It has to be done by the end of our fiscal year. And I said, oh, so now we have some leverage here.
Yeah.
So we ended up getting the job anyway. So it's funny. He used to balk at this pricing model I created for him all the time, because he'd be like, man, it just doesn't make sense. It seems like it's too high. That example, now he never asks.
Yeah, you only need to learn the lesson once, hopefully, right?
Yeah, he's like, I trust you now. I trust you. Yeah. It works.
Yeah, we've been talking a little bit here about pricing and the model and everything, and not related, but separate but related. Like, what's your take on like how much one? And it's of course it's gonna be different by industry and by company, but like how much should one spend on marketing?
Good question. I get that question all the time. And especially, now we've been dealing recently, at least in the US, well, I guess globally, but in the US, especially with, declining economy, challenging economies. I think a lot of people, that's the first place they look, or one of the first places they look is, I'm going to cut my marketing. I understand that thought process, but, I generally tell people they should be spending between 2 and 8% of their gross revenue on marketing. You can go up to 15% on short-term basis. Let's say you open a new location, you have a new product launch, something like that. On short term, you want to do a big blitz, but really try to stay in that 2 to 8%. And when I tell people that, it really gives them a good baseline, because they go, oh, okay. Like, they think in terms of, I think, raw dollars. Like, oh, I spend 10,000 a month, I spend 100,000 a month, whatever it might be. Instead of thinking about it again, margin wise, margin management, again, that third pillar of staying in that range. And I mentioned the 2% because even in a down economy, when things start to get tight, it's critically important to make sure that you can't cut off all your marketing, because then if your marketing is working correctly, and if you should be measuring it, right, and make sure it is, you're cutting off your sales pipeline. So when you need sales the most, you're going to be shrinking that pipeline, which is just going to cause downstream impacts as you go along. And the other aspect of that is, if you're like a local brick and mortar, let's say that I'm Ken's Plumbing and I'm running radio ads, or I have a billboard or something like that. So people are hearing Ken's Plumbing regularly on the radio, and all of a sudden they don't hear it anymore. But Deepak Plumbing starts running ads. When I cut mine off, all of a sudden they're like, maybe Ken went out of business. I hear Deepak all the time, so I'm going to give Deepak a call.
What about of course, it's got to make sense for all the other metrics we've talked about, but what about even like increasing a little bit to where, like maybe Ken went out of business, so like, and Deepak can swoop in and pick it all up because he's doing actually extra marketing.
Absolutely. So with my clients, I learned this in my corporate days. Thank goodness to Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan. I learned this from him as making sure you build, he calls it a fortress balance sheet. So you're prepared for down economic times, because opportunities present themselves during that time, because a lot of your competitors didn't do that. So they're the ones saying, we can't spend any more on marketing. They're closing up the marketing. And to your point, if you have the wherewithal, 100%, I would say double what you're spending on marketing in those situations, because you can seize market share in those circumstances for sure, and be able to seize opportunities that come up, as opposed to being, shrinking in a ball, thinking more, I guess, along the lines of abundance, as opposed to, like, oh my gosh, it's the end of the world. We got to, do all these things.
Right.
Now you have to have the financial wherewithal. So you have to be prepared for that ahead of time, right? So you have to be preparing your business for the inevitable economic downturn. I think that's what happened. Obviously COVID hit everybody, right? But the odd part about that, Deepak, is so, the average economic cycle is about 5 years, right? You go up and then you hit a trough, and then it's like 5 years, right?
Yeah.
We had gone 10 years continually going up, no troughs. And so I started preparing my clients. I said, there's an economic downturn coming. And I said, I think it's going to happen in about 18 months, maybe 24, but I want to be prepared at 18. And so we started making changes in the business and on the financial side, be prepared for that. And they're like, and this is, again, we'd had all this unprecedented growth for 10 straight years. And so most of my clients are like, oh, you're being paranoid. Everything's fine. Well, COVID ended up, accelerating that decline. So I look like literally one of my clients, he's like, what are you, Nostradamus? I'm like, look, I didn't know COVID was going to happen. Okay. So don't give me credit for that. But there was an economic downturn coming, even if COVID didn't happen. I mean, it's just,
right.
You can't go 10 years. I mean, it's just the normal cycle of business. It was going to come. And so we were able to, in those situations, a lot of companies didn't make it through COVID, as you well know, because they weren't prepared for it, because they, for lack of a better term, got fat, dumb, and happy, because, man, we can grow 20% year over year without hardly any effort, because, the economy has just been growing for 10 straight years. And so you get lulled into that sense of growth, like without much effort, without much discipline, you can have that. And so we were able to, see some opportunities during that. We had one of my, actually two of my clients ended up buying a competitor.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up. That's also, besides increasing your marketing, is like, if you have the wherewithal and you're financially prepared, you can buy your competitors out.
Yeah, and some people look at that, and again, I've gotten some flack online about it, and they're like, well, that sounds like predatory. I'm like, no, not at all. You're looking at it the wrong way, because if we did not have that wherewithal, that company would have closed their doors. You would have had all of their workers out of business. The owner is going to, lose his business, lose all the assets that he's built up with that business and things like that. Whereas we were able to buy the company, helps our company, obviously, but saved all those jobs,
Right.
gave the owner, the outgoing owner, a nice exit, right? He doesn't like just have his pockets out bare. He's not found bankruptcy or anything like that. So it created a ton of opportunity. And so both of those companies went from being second or third in their market to first by a landslide. So
by combining,
and they've continued to grow. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've been kind of on this kind of train of thought here, and maybe you've already said it then, but what's the number one not to do during an economic downturn?
Yeah, for me, the number one thing to not do is shrink into a ball in the fetal position, and it's looking for those opportunities. And again, if you haven't set yourself up ahead of time, maybe you don't have the financial wherewithal to be able to do it. So again, I understand you need to take the appropriate actions in those cases. I'm not saying to just spend money and end up filing bankruptcy down the road or whatever, but I think that's what a lot of people, when the economy does start to turn south, because a lot of people got stung. Even if you did make it through COVID, you probably took some bumps and bruises along the way. So then post-COVID, things start to go back up, and then we start to go back down. And I think a lot of people just like really freaked out and really started to think anti-abundance, right? Really started to think like, oh my gosh, I got to batten down the hatches. I don't know what's going to happen. And you end up, again, losing market share, things like that. And I like to think in those situations as looking for opportunities as opposed to looking for all the bad stuff, right? It's like anything else, right? And I know this is getting a little woo-woo, but it's so true. Like, if I tell you all of a sudden, Deepak, hey man, let's play a game, and I'm gonna pinch you every time I see a purple car. All of a sudden you're like, man, I didn't realize there's so many dang purple cars. And then the next day you go, there's the same number of purple cars that were on the road yesterday that are on there today. You just never look for them.
Yeah.
And I think it's so true in life as well, that if all you're doing is looking for the negative news or what's the next bad thing that's going to happen, one of the age-old sayings that people say all the time, oh, when it rains, it pours. And I feel like that's just, more of that mentality of like, oh, well, two bad things have happened today. What's next? And so you start to look for those things instead of creating that mindset of, okay, that was a challenge. That was a bump in the road, but let's move on. Let's look for the positive things.
I want to share this. Yeah, I 100% agree with you, Ken. I just want to share this. It's kind of funny is that it's in my own personal life is, members of my family is like, you said when it rains, it pours. They're like, oh my God, it's like 20% chance of like precipitation today. Maybe we should cancel our golf and whatever. I'm like, it's an 80% chance of not. Like, what are you talking about?
That's exactly, I've had the same exact conversation. I've got a someone in my family who is negative Ned, and same thing. We were going to do something outdoors. It wasn't golfing, but it was something outdoors. And he's like, oh man, it's a 40% chance of rain. I go, 60% chance it's not going to rain. Like, think about things differently, man. Like,
yeah, absolutely. So Ken, as we kind of wrap up here, last couple of questions here. And again, this is not a health podcast, even though that's kind of what I work on with my clients. I do like to ask my clients, like, what does your morning routine look like, or what's a non-negotiable from a health perspective for you?
I mean, for me, it is it's moving my body in some form. So I used to be a competitive powerlifter. I was a certified personal trainer way back. I've always taken health and exercise been a very important element of my life. It has become less important over the years, and I need to get back and be a little bit more consistent with it. But I'm still working out 3 or 4 times a week, but I'm used to working out 5 or 6 times a week. So it's not quite the same for me. But really, one of the things I learned, especially as you've got kids and you've got all these different things and businesses and things like that, is instead of putting pressure on myself, which worked for me, to do a specific type of exercise, I have come to the fact now that I'm like, I just need to move my body every morning in some form or fashion. If I don't have much time, there are times that I will ride my Peloton for 10 minutes, which I know a lot of people are like, 10 minutes, what the heck is that? I'm still moving my body. At least I feel okay that I actually did something, as opposed to just skipping it altogether.
Right.
If I don't have time, or I'm between clients, I'll go for a walk, right? It's not lifting weights. Well, I wanted to lift weights today. Well, I don't have time today. So I'm at least going to move my body in some way. And I find that when I do that, when I adhere to that and move my body in some way, even if it's just 10 minutes on a Peloton, or even if it's just a brief walk or something, I always feel better. And even with the gym and things like that, I have never left a workout mentally feeling worse than when I started the workout.
I don't think anyone
never
has.
once
I
in
don't
my
think
life.
anyone in the world has ever felt mentally.
Ever.
Physically, maybe, but
physically,
mentally, no.
physically, you're limping and you're like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't have squatted so heavy or whatever. But mentally, I've been working out and been in the fitness world and things like that for 30 plus years, and it's never once happened. And as a matter of fact, when you're having a crappy day, in my opinion, that's even more reason. And when I'm having a bad day, I have to go work out because I know it's going to make me feel better.
Yeah. It reminds me of, I remember back in university, and people would be like cramming right before an exam and whatever. Like for me, it was like, and I had anxiety about the exam too. Like I'd go work out, or like back to back, during finals or whatever. Like, maybe an hour in between two different exams, like there people are going to cram for that second one. Like, no, I'm going to go work out in between. Like that's so much more beneficial to me
Yeah,
than that
same.
extra. If I didn't know it by then, I'm not going to know it now, right?
Right.
The material, right? So, what is one thing, could be health or could be business related, you choose, that you wish you would have started earlier in your life? Or another way to put it, maybe, what do you wish you could go back and tell your younger self? Some piece of advice.
One thing I wish I would have done earlier is even again, I had a great corporate career. I wish I would have left the corporate world earlier. I couldn't have left it too much earlier because again, I needed the experience that I gained in the corporate world. But I wish I would have left and struck out on my own as an entrepreneur a little earlier than I did because again, I just absolutely love it. Advice I would give my my younger self would be, and I use this with my daughters now as they're getting in that age range or whatever, is having confidence in yourself. And not that I didn't have confidence, but it took me a while to build it. And I think that is important. And another way, I guess, is a little bit of a tangent to that, but one thing I started to really use as almost like an axiom in my life is start with yes. So, and I started using this in my corporate career. So when someone comes to you and says, hey, we need to do this, this, and this, and you go, oh, there's so much, the vast majority of people, they start with no. And what I mean by that, and maybe this will relate to someone who's watching or listening, is you go to someone and you go, hey, what if we did this, this, and this? The first thing out of their mouth is why it won't work. It's, well, we tried that. Well, when did you try it? Well, it was like 5 or 6 years ago. Well, the world's way different now.
Right.
And by the way, when you tried it, how did it not work? So let's change that. Let's change that variable and see if it works now. Or, oh, that'll never work, or that's too expensive, or that's going to take too much time. Okay, but I look at things and say, let's start with yes. Maybe when you figure out what it takes to get there, at the end, it's not worth it, right? Oh, it's going to take, you got to work 20 hours a day for the next 2 weeks. And I use this example in the corporate world. We had this big project that we needed to do, and it's for top of the house at JP Morgan. And some people on my team were like, it would take 5 people working 20 hours a day for the next week to get this done. And I said, okay, well, clearly we don't do that. What if we had 8 people work on it and it took 2 weeks? Now what's that look like? Oh, okay. Well, yeah, we could do. So again, start with yes. Tell me how we can make it work. If you tell me it's going to take a month of reasonable workload to do it, okay, a month is too long. It's not going to work. Okay, at least we tried. But to just start off by saying, oh, there's no way, this takes too long, we can't do it. I think it's really, really important to do that in all aspects of your life. In all aspects. Oh, I need to lose 50 pounds. It's going to take too long. It's too much working out. I'll never go to the gym. Like, no, what does that look like? It took you, and then this is right up your alley, I'm sure. Most people, like if you're, I don't know, 50 pounds overweight, they want to lose it in 2 months. Well, it took you 10 years to put the 50 pounds on. You put on 5 pounds a month. I'm not saying it should take you 10 years to lose it, but you shouldn't expect in 60 days you're going to lose 50 what it took you 10 years to put on. Like, make some subtle changes in your life and lifestyle changes to get there. I think it's super important to have that mentality when someone presents you with an idea, especially as an entrepreneur. You really have to think, start with yes. And again, maybe the parameters necessary and in the end don't work, but at least you came up with how will it work? How can it work?
Yeah, Ken, I want to just, for the audience, just make this parallel to something we were talking about, offline before we hit the record button about. I'm a huge fan of like masterminds and that sort of thing, because sometimes we have this notion of that maybe not in our general all the time life, maybe in a very specific problem of like, I don't know if this is all to work, but you get some people's different perspectives, come from different industries, different experiences, backgrounds, what have you, and they're like, they provide you like, well, like you said, like, oh, you tried that, but when did you try that? And they challenge you back, and they're like, that's why I find masterminds so powerful. Huge proponent of those. So thank you for sharing that. And you do have a gift for the listeners. And I'm just going to give the title, and you can maybe describe it briefly for the audience. What business owners need to know to be successful in 2024. What is and we'll have the link and all of Ken's links and everything in the show notes, everyone. So you can find the gift and find him on social media and all that type of thing. But what is this gift?
Yeah, it's a video I did. So I did a video. I get tons of questions and things like that. And actually, I've been doing them for, I want to say 3 years now. So I usually release it at the end of December every year for the, following year as I look at the economy. So throughout this video, I talk about what to expect in the economy, various aspects of the economy, the stock market, the interest rates, unemployment, things like that. And so what do those things, here's what I expect is going to happen throughout the year with that, and how you as a business owner should be taking actions now to be successful and be able to adjust necessarily for whatever those economic factors are. I know for 2024, I talk about what are some opportunities to look for in 2024. Again, thinking abundance, not thinking about of battening down the hatches, thinking, because hopefully it'll help people get into that mindset of like, oh crap, I never really thought about it from that perspective, and to change their mindset. But that's what a lot of it's about, is things that I see not only from the economy but even knock-on impacts from those economic factors. Now, if what I think is going to happen in the economy happens, what is that going to look like? What other things is that going to impact? Okay, oh my gosh, the supply chain. We've got military conflict in the Ukraine. We've got it now in the Middle East, and is that going to impact the supply chain? If you have supply chain issues, what does that look like? What should you be doing now to sort of reduce or eliminate some of that risk that could be presented by something like that? That's one example I know that I talked about on this most recent video.
Awesome. So I'm not sure when exactly everyone's going to be watching this when this is released, but it'll certainly be in the first half of 2024. So there's still a whole 6 months to listen to what Ken had to say and figure out what resonates with you and what works is particular to your business, and make those maybe not necessarily make changes, but be aware of them anyway, and perhaps make changes.
And the funny part about that, Deepak, is even if you don't see it until the middle of 2024, the great part is I recorded it in December of 2023. So if nothing else, you can watch it 6 months in and go, Ken was full of crap. He was completely wrong with his
there's always that entertainment value as well, for sure.
That's
absolutely,
right.
Absolutely. Ken, I want to thank you for being a guest today. I really appreciate it. I know it took us some time to finally bang this out, so I really appreciate your time today. It's been awesome having you, and such a wealth of knowledge, for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. I know we've talked online for a couple of years now. It was good to connect and come on the show. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. So remember, everyone, don't forget to also check out today's show sponsor. All the information's in the show notes, as well as I mentioned, the link to Ken's gift and all his other links that he provided for us, and definitely connect with Ken for sure. I'm going to throw it to J23, who's going to play us out with some music. And thank you again for listening to the Deepak Saini Show. Remember, exceptional results for the exceptional you. Till next time. This episode is brought to you by Optimizer's Masszymes. This is digestive enzymes that helps you break down your protein, fats, starches, and sugars. I've been using this product for, over a year now, specifically in a protein-heavy meal, because I really want to break down my protein to make sure I get the amino acids that I need for maintaining muscle growth, maintaining lean muscle mass. Super important as we age and all stages of life, really. So again, huge proponent of Masszymes. Check out the link below to see how you can get at least 10% off, if not more. Cheers.
Podcast produced by the Minted Green Company